back online in just a moment. Thank you for your patience. Right, we're coming out of our recess, back into it. We've got the presentation and discussion from NCTCOG regarding Hyperloop, a high-speed transportation technology currently being discussed. And we've got a presentation from the COG's representative. Sir,
I guess I'll come stand over here. Is that all right?
Sure, yeah. Sorry about the awkwardness of the layout here.
Oh, no problem at all. Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Wheeler. I'm a program manager at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. I do have my focus is on the long-range plan in Dallas-Fort Worth. So actually interested to hear the work y'all been doing, developing for your 2050 plan as well. But this topic is actually about a long-range transit study for the state between Fort Worth and Laredo. So wanted to provide you all kind of an update on some of the latest efforts there. Several of you that were around back in the 2018, 2019 era, you may remember this Fort Worth Laredo study. TxDOT even did a study prior to that, which I'll mention as well. But since that point in time, we've received some interest from a Hyperloop developer, Hyperloop technology developer. And so we think this is a good time to re-energize the study and hopefully take it a step forward. So next slide. The Fort Worth Laredo study that was completed in 2020 was really an MPO-led effort. COG, Waco, Killeen Temple, the Austin area MPO, Campo, Alamo area MPO in Austin and Laredo. Basically, all the major communities along the 35 corridor were involved in this high-speed study. And as I mentioned, it was an NPO collaborative effort, and it built on top of a study TxDOT did in coordination with Oklahoma called the Texas-Oklahoma Passenger Rail Study. So next slide. Texas Toppers, as we call it, Texas-Oklahoma Passenger Rail Study is what they call a tier 1 environmental study, where they looked at a very high level, looking at a very broad range of corridors and modes, including all the way up to high-speed rail, basically along the 35 corridor from Oklahoma City all the way down to Laredo, with consideration for someday going maybe all the way to Monterrey, Mexico, across the border. So TxDOT completed their study maybe in the 2016, 2017 area. And this study came on the heels of that, again, led by the MPOs to say, look, you know, high-speed rail, that's great. Frankly, that's been around since the 50s in other parts of the world. It's not around in the US, but we want to make sure if we're building infrastructure that's going to last hundreds of years, at least 100 years, that we're looking at the latest technology and making sure that we're incorporating that into our consideration. So this Fort Worth Laredo high-speed study included high-speed rail, but also maglev technology and Hyperloop technology. Maglev technology is already in operation in some parts of the world. Hyperloop still in development. The concept is high-speed rail is basically electrified rail, steel wheels on steel rails. Maglev reduces the friction from the wheels to the rails by levitating the train above the rails with magnetic levitation technology. So it's able to go faster. And Hyperloop further reduces the air resistance by putting in basically a pressure reduced tube, allowing that pod to reach up speed, theoretically, speeds in the 600-mile-an-hour range. So again, we're talking quite fast, but we are talking quite a long corridor. So the findings of the study between Fort Worth and Laredo looked at these major communities and having stops. Again, pairing potential corridors with technologies. And through the study, we found that most of the Hyperloop corridors, again, being faster, They're a slightly different operation than rail, where it's more of an on-demand feature. If you're going from Austin to Fort Worth, you don't have to stop. You go straight the entire distance. Whereas if you're rail, you stop at every station. So there's a little more advantage to Hyperloop, but again, the disadvantage is it's in development. So are they able to produce what they say they're able to produce? So a lot of things to consider, but at the end of the day, the study findings showed that Hyperloop following generally these corridors between these major cities was advantageous and something that we believe should be taken to the next level, which is where the state would need to get involved, TxDOT, to be able to advance this to more of a project level based design and environmental study. Next slide. So that study completed in 2020. So moving on from that point, I'm sure all of you remember in 2020, we had a lot of other priorities in mind beyond long range planning. So that kind of sat for a little bit, and a couple years later in DFW, basically your counterpart in Dallas-Fort Worth Regional Transportation Council, our policy board, they started a program called the Certification of Emerging and Reliable Transportation Technology, or CERT. In government, you know, we are very, we like acronyms. So this is our CERT program. And the concept of this program is to introduce new technologies to help solve transportation issues. Also to help infuse private dollars into transportation infrastructure, knowing that there's only so much at the federal level, so much at the state level, so much at the local level, and we're using those dollars as best we can. But the need is outpacing the supply. So looking for the private sector to be able to infuse dollars in, looking at potential new transportation technologies, kind of shown in these pictures here. One of the vendors or providers that's interested in our program was TransPod. And the concept behind the program is these new technologies are not certified to operate safely. They don't have any standards built around them like our roadway systems do, like our trains do. Those have been around for a long time. There's been standards built. We know how they need to operate in order to operate safely. These new technologies, those standards have not been created yet. In order to be created, they'd have to build a facility. So for instance, Hyperloop, they would need to build somewhere in the range of 10 to 50 miles length of tunnel, or excuse me, a tube, to be able to actually get up to speeds and be certified by Federal Railroad Administration to be able to operate safely in our public rights of way. So the concept is, instead of building that 10 to 50 mile an hour, 10 to 50 mile tube somewhere out in the desert, somewhere, you know, farmland, why not build it somewhere near an urban center where you're able to visit it, where you're able to showcase it, where you're able to bring in folks from all over the world to kind of test it out and see how it works, and build it along an alignment that you intend to keep in perpetuity, not something that's throwaway. Because these facilities could be in the tens of millions of dollars to build, right? So that's the concept behind the program and why TransPod approached our region in Dallas-Fort Worth. But if you go to the next slide, TransPod is really interested in an intercity movement. Hyperloop is not within a metro region. It's not efficient. That's not what it's for. It's an intercity movement type of technology, kind of like high-speed rail. So for TransPod, just a little caveat here, I'm not an expert on Hyperloop or TransPod. As I mentioned, I'm with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, but unfortunately they weren't able to, our TransPod colleagues weren't able to make it to this meeting. So if you'll bear with me, I'll do my best to share a little bit about who they are. They're a Canadian company. They specialize in developing this Hyperloop technology. And their concept is moving forward with a fully electric system, a sustainable system in their mind. And they even have proposed incorporating solar panels on top of the tubes to be able to maybe not fully power their Hyperloop, but at least supplement most of the power they would need by solar panels. So next slide. Here's what their technology looks like at the pod level. Basically, kind of like I said, it's like a maglev train, and a shorter version, it's a pod, since it's more of an on-demand type system. These are 80, 85 foot long pods. It would levitate within the tube, and it would have transfer of power from kind of like a third rail, almost like a subway system that has a third rail within the tube that would transfer via plasma arc to the pod to be able to use induction motors to propel the pod through the tube at 600 plus miles an hour.
So is the flux, so if you're boarding this thing, are you getting inside the flux jet? And then the flux jet goes inside the transpod? The transpod's on the loop, or?
No, so these are basically the same types of vehicle.
Oh, these are two different models.
Correct.
Of something that you said like levitates
within a tube.
Within the tube.
That's correct.
How many could one of these models, how many human beings could fit in there if it was at capacity?
Each Hyperloop company has kind of a different concept of how they're proposing this technology. For transpod with an 85 foot pod, I don't remember how many they said, but it's under maybe 100 people, so maybe 80 people or so to be seated comfortably. And the concept is that instead of, again, since they don't have to stop at every station like a train does, they would operate differently, where you're not trying to move a lot of people in as few trains as possible. You're building as many pods as you need, such that if you have a pod waiting in Waco going to San Antonio, you bypass all the other pods that are going to Austin or to Fort Worth or wherever, and you jump on the pod going to San Antonio, and there's 80 people going with you.
So how do the pod, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is cool, but so like if you're in a pod and you get on in Waco, you and 80 folks get on in Waco, and you're heading to San Antonio, and a similar pod is getting on the same track in Austin, would you be behind pods, like queuing behind pods, or?
So there would at least be two tubes on the corridor at all times. So one tube is going one direction, one tube is going the other direction. It's similar to a freeway, if you look at it that way, where you basically have off ramps going to the stations and things. So you have the high speed tube that's going inner city, and then as you get close to the city, you either take an off ramp to the station or something to that effect. And these pods, since they are automated, they propose that you can do very, very short headways between these pods within the tube. So you're able to gain a lot of efficiency that you would not gain on a freeway, where we build a freeway in number of lanes, right? Because the headway is supposed to be 2 seconds between vehicles, more like half a second. But for pods, they're able to operate at 600 miles an hour with a few seconds between pods. You're able to gain a lot of capacity, more frankly capacity today than we actually have people traveling on 35.
So there could be several of them just seconds apart if one of them breaks.
If one of them, so again, that goes back to the automation. These aren't operated individually; they're operated as a system.
Okay.
So you have a control system, much like you have for trains, where if something happens to one, all of them know at the same time.
Okay,
that's right.
Okay. Kind of like the Skyway at DFW.
Okay,
that's right.
Sorry, thanks.
No,
appreciate it.
Those are great questions. So here's kind of an example: is you have two tubes. This is just a schematic of a terminal station, not a through station. So as you have the tubes coming along in this, or as you have the pods coming along in this pressure reduced tube, eventually you're going to go through an airlock and then come into regular atmosphere, where the pods can then be transported to the station, open the doors, you can get out where you're not having to deal with, airlock issues. So that's the concept behind how you would approach a station with these pods. Again, there's a lot of engineering that goes into the airlock and where those are, how you connect off ramps to the main ramps, the switching mechanisms, all those kinds of things. That's really what separates the some Hyperloop companies from others, is all the technology that's within Hyperloop is in operation today in some form or fashion, but putting them all together has been the difficult part. And that's been what's every Hyperloop company has a different way of doing that. So
how many different Hyperloop companies are there right
now? The ones that we've spoken with, there's at least 6 well-known ones. Virgin was one of those. They decided to do only freight. Mostly because their investors are more interested in freight, and freight's easier to certify for. You don't have to certify for public, those kind of things. It's basically a faster way for them to get a buck. But there's a lot of Hyperloop companies that are interested in both, like Transpod, moving people and freight. There's several in Europe, Hyperloop, Zeleros, and there's more coming along by the day.
Are they all in research and development? Like there's not currently a functioning Hyperloop on the globe?
That's correct. The Virgin Hyperloop was the closest. At least they were the closest in showcasing it. They are in Europe right now. They're building a Hyperloop certification center somewhere in the Netherlands, I believe, where several Hyperloop companies are coming together saying, look, it's one thing to be competitive, but if we're going to actually prove that Hyperloop works at all, we really need to pool our resources and build something that you can build standards for.
Yeah.
So you don't have a Transpod Hyperloop system only,
Right.
a Zeleros Hyperloop system only, where they can't, it's kind of like building standard gauge for trains. So here's what Transpod's vision is for Texas. Frankly, they're interested in anything in Texas along the Texas Triangle. Anything between Fort Worth, Dallas, and Houston, Austin, San Antonio, or on the 35 leg. But what's interesting is since the Fort Worth Laredo study was just recently completed, that really caught their eye, as well as the potential connection into Mexico and someday. So they're very interested in moving forward with a feasibility study for this corridor. So they're first in the short term, they would look to do this feasibility study. And if it does prove feasible, they would look to see where can they build their certification facility, this 10 to 50 mile facility. It doesn't have to be in Dallas, Fort Worth. At COG, that's, we kind of raised our hand, says we're interested, but they may wish to build it somewhere else along the line. In the medium term, they would then have to certify their product. And that may take a few years to build the certification facility, actually get FRA to the table, to build standards around, okay, if you do it this way, it's safe for the public, this makes sense. FRA can build standards for Hyperloop in the US. And then following successful certification, they would then build out their entire corridor in the long term. So here's what they would look to do in this short-term feasibility study. What they've told us is, or at least our understanding of it, is Transpod wants to foot the bill themselves. They understand this is on their back. So their interest is this going to make financial sense for them? They want to look at the entire corridor to say, can they actually make money? Does it make sense from a passenger or maybe a freight standpoint? Then they're going to look at where it makes sense to go. Does it make sense to go along the corridors that we studied in the previous Fort Worth Laredo study with their technology? Do they need to deviate slightly from that? Where are they stopping? How do you connect to the cities? They have, I don't know if we showed it, but they have some concepts on how the tube would look, and mostly it's aerial. So it's going to be grade separated up in the air on bridge structure in these tubes. As you come into an urban center, depending on whether a community wishes to have a station in an urban center or more on the outskirts, there's pros and cons involved, and that's where the communities would need to get involved and be a part of that study to say, hey, we're not interested in you coming into our urban center, or no, we really want you to come to our downtown, right? And there's pros and cons to either of those, and whether they're aerial coming in or whether they need to be in a tunnel.
So there is an element in which Transpod and other Hyperloop developers are determining which communities they want to service with essentially like a station. Is that correct?
There is, I would say it's, especially at this early stage, they're interested in being a partner. So it does need to make financial sense for them. But even if it doesn't make full financial sense, if they're going to gain a partner in the process that's going to help champion Hyperloop being advanced in the state, they may be willing to do more to make sure that station's a possibility, even if it doesn't make financial sense for them in the short term.
But like if a community said to them, no, nay, never, we don't want Hyperloop, as opposed to, hey, we really do want this, like, are they looking at communities in that way, or are they looking at it more like, hey, there's a market here, there's one in Bell County, there's one in Austin, you know what I'm saying? Like, what areas we could get on in Waco?
Right, it is a little bit of both. So if they have a community that's completely against it, I think they're gonna do everything in their power to abide by the wishes of the community. And avoid it. Now, obviously, that may make a difference in how they're able to get from point A to point B along the corridor. And that's really where the state TxDOT getting involved makes a big difference because, well, let's be honest, in the state of Texas, private entities building long transportation investments is always a little bit iffy when you deal with private landowners, right? So having the state involved, where the public at least feels like they have some recourse and some say in where this line goes, how it stops, and all those things. That's really what TransPod, and if they hear anything from COG, that's what we would be whispering to them. Hey, you really need to take this in a public-friendly grassroots approach to make sure what you're building is what the community wants.
Are you primarily looking to use TxDOT corridors?
So back to the findings of our study, we are looking to use transportation corridors as much as possible. Or that's what we would be telling them. We did a high speed, or we're in the process of doing a high speed study between Fort Worth and Dallas. And that was a charge that we had from Governor Abbott at the time, was be on public sector right of way as much as possible. In fact, 85% of our corridor will be along I-30 between Fort Worth and Dallas. So the study that was completed for this Fort Worth to Laredo, between all the way to San Antonio, I believe, was proposed to be on or near adjacent to public right of way. The difficulty becomes with Hyperloop or with high-speed rail or any of these technologies, to go fast, you need to be straight. And our corridors aren't always straight. If they have a bend in them somewhere in the middle, that significantly reduces travel time, which affects ridership, affects revenue, affects everything. So it's a little bit of a give and take along the corridor, and that's where the study comes in, the communication comes in, and then all those factors.
So like, I'm sorry to bog down all these details, but like, so there is a bend in the track or a bend in the route. I mean, are you slowing down from 600 miles an hour to 300 in that point? Or like, what does that mean? Like, what do you?
So you would expect coming in, so for instance, let's just say, let's use Waco as an example. Let's say coming down, I think it was a utility corridor between Fort Worth and Waco, was one that was highlighted as a potential. And so if, let's just say for sake of argument, that Waco desires to have a station in city center downtown. To get to the downtown, maybe you have to slow down and take a few curves to get there. So that you're not displacing a lot of the downtown or the uptown or some of the areas within Waco that are sensitive to that. Then that's kind of the cost of doing business. That's the cost of accessing the station. But if you have a severe bend halfway between on one of these long distance segments where you're not coming to a stop at all, that's where you have to weigh the pros and cons of how much does it cost to straighten that out? Does it cost in public acceptance of the project? Does it cost in actual dollars? Does it cost in right-of-way purchasability, geography, constructability? They really have to weigh all those options and decide maybe it's worth it for us to slow down from 600 to 100 on this section, but then on another section, it's worth it for us to just go ahead and purchase the right-of-way to make it a straighter piece.
Have they already determined what kind of right of way is necessary for 2 tubes?
I think TransPod has their ideas. Going back to, I can only speak to our experience on the study between Fort Worth and Dallas because we did include Hyperloop as an option. And it's pretty similar to high-speed rail, where if they require their own right of way and they're not sharing the right of way with another public sector roadway or utility or what have you, you're looking at around 100 feet right of way for 2 tubes and perhaps a maintenance road. But if you're able to share some of that right of way, like what we're proposing to do along I-30, there are certain sections where we're proposing to be on structure between the frontage road and the main lanes. So we're really not taking any right of way or adding any right of way to the freeway. So it really is going to depend on how you're able to share rights of way along the corridor.
But that's just a guess because they haven't standardized.
That's correct. They haven't standardized it and they don't actually know where it is. And that goes back to the speed tests and the ability to actually look at these corridors to determine what makes sense. If, for instance, going around Austin, They don't want you to be on the 130 corridor. They don't want you going anywhere near the downtown. Then that's gonna change. You know, maybe you can still keep up speeds, but if you're going into downtown, you may have to weave a line. So that'll all be a part of their feasibility study. And their feasibility study won't do a full design, but it's gonna look at the options and say, we think we can get speeds here, we think we can get ridership here, we think we can gain revenue here. Here's some issues we need to work out with the community and other areas. So it's really gonna kind of highlight the fatal flaws, problem areas, those kind. So kind of putting a bow on this. We, back in 2020 with the Fort Worth Laredo study, we had tried to approach TxDOT and Transportation Commission with the results. Waco and other MPOs like COG were all interested in basically saying, look, we built upon your topper study. We would like to take this further. This is a significant interest among the MPOs along this corridor. Well, as I mentioned, COVID happened. So we're really refreshing this effort to take the results of this study back to TxDOT, back to the commission, and bringing this opportunity from Transpod of not only are we a study, but we actually have an operator that may be willing to take it a step further. But to go a step further, we really need the state's involvement, kind of at least the state's backing to say, we're interested, let's talk about it. So we've submitted a letter back in August. We've had conversations with all the MPO directors and have received positive feedback, providing presentations like this to boards that are interested. So we're waiting to hear back from TxDOT on next steps. So the questions or considerations, just want to leave with all of you. One, is this something you're interested in supporting? Is there questions you may have? Happy to get you in touch with Transpod if there's more questions about Hyperloop that they can answer. Are you wishing to be considered for this certification center? Again, that's a Transpod decision of what makes the most sense, but they want to be where they're wanted. And finally, if you are interested in pursuing this further, would you consider in being part of the data sharing as Transpod moves forward with a feasibility study so that they can have the information they need, make the decisions they need to. So, happy to take any other questions if there are.
Are you looking for a response to that today from the policy board?
So what we discussed was, so after the presentation and clarification today, what we would like the policy board to do is tell the MPO staff, you would like us to move, bring forward a resolution for the next meeting, which will be a supporting resolution that we supported with these supporting statements, and then that will be part of our support letter if you would choose to do so. And so today, all we would expect you to do is with yay and nay, let the staff know that you want us to bring a supporting resolution forward for the next meeting.
And it's just a support letter, it's not a financial commitment of any kind.
That is correct.
I would worry, like in certain rural communities that resisted the railroad in the 1900s or the 1800s, and then saw themselves become marginal. I would hate to miss out on a new technology that could help our economy if it gets going. I don't know if there's any harm in a letter of support.
I have a question. So it's kind of like you mentioned railroads. When you get to your destination, whether you're freight or a person, if you're freight, then you need the infrastructure to unload the freight and get it onto the trucks or to a train or whatever.
That's right.
If you're a person, you get out, and now how do you get to your final destination? Because you have a car to get around. So would there be, they'd have to have a type of offloading facility, and then they need to be taxis, your Ubers, whatever, or rental cars, or kind of like airports and stuff. You can then go where you need to go.
Sure. No, good question. So I'll use Austin as an example. It depends, similar to any other infrastructure you would build. There's gonna be pros and cons to where you put the station and how you configure it. The concept behind Hyperloop and frankly, for that matter, high-speed rail is it functions better when it's connected to the major multimodal transit centers, downtowns, those kind of areas. Airports are where they are because of land, right, and flights. So we build infrastructure to get to airports. Airports are really just stuck where they can be located. Rail, even though it can be expensive with tunnels or aerial or what have you, even Hyperloop, you're building a lot of that anyways. So why not take it to those locations where the community wants to have that multimodal center, where you do have transit connections, commuter rail, regional rail, buses, micro transit, all those kind of things, as opposed to kind of sticking it on the periphery so that you can avoid potential impact. So that's again, that goes back to the pros and cons conversation. Each community is going to have to decide for themselves. Austin may decide they'd rather have, if we move forward with this, they may decide we'd rather the Hyperloop come along, say Highway 130, and maybe have a station over there by the airport. They're still going to have to get people all the way to their downtown or the UT campus or wherever they're going. They're going to have to figure that out. Or they could decide, no, we really want this to be located. So we'd rather fight the battle of figuring out how to get it there, even if it is more expensive, because we think it's going to be more value added to our community. So I would say it's better to connect to the downtowns and the major multimodal centers as opposed to having to build infrastructure out to it. You're already building the infrastructure, but that's a decision each community is going to make. Thank you.
So is anyone opposed to the staff taking this direction from us to kind of green light a letter of support on this?
Sounds like a good idea.
You feel like you're directing us? Thank you. All right, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for helping us understand it. All right, let's move to our next agenda, which is update discussion from Mobilize Waco regarding efforts to raise awareness of pedestrian issues both locally and statewide. We have a presentation from Suzette.
No, forward. Good then. He's so used to laying down under things. I'm Suzette May. I'm with Mobilize Waco, and this is my seeing eye dog Fred. You may see us walking around town. We like to walk around a lot. I'm with an organization called Mobilize Waco. We're a disability advocacy organization that is. Sorry, my phone talks to me all the time and it just totally interrupted my train of thought. We're a disability advocacy organization dedicated to getting people with disabilities in positions of getting them more accessibility, getting them visible, and getting them into leadership. And can everybody can, okay, it's just me. Okay. Next slide. Okay, this is, so what we do is we are trying to get Waco more accessible, and we're trying to get the disabled more involved in the community, more involved in areas of leadership. This is my friend Donna Dill. She's vice president of Extraco Bank here in town. And she's in a wheelchair. She's been a wheelchair user for most of her life. And some of the things we have trouble with, and just for a note, these two places that are shown here, text dot obliterated and they're no longer there, they're fixed. But we use these as an example because there's other places in town like this. Some of the things are some of our biggest problems getting around is accessibility. And in respects to getting from point A to point B, so getting there, having safe sidewalks and safe street crossings, and having a wheelchair accessible vehicle. And I put my notes on the slide so you can read my slides. So I'm not going to read this slide to you because I can't read it. But one of the things that's important is many of us are already using needing the accessibility, but any one of us could be needing it within an hour or tomorrow. You just never know when you're gonna get inducted into this demographic. It doesn't, it spans across social barriers, economic barriers, all sorts of, social and economic demographics. Anybody can be a part of this. So when we make things accessible for everyone, it could be affecting your future too. Next slide. Oh, okay. This is Bruce Tuck. He's one of our action team members. And we were really grateful that TxDOT let us go try out all of the intersections that they did along 35. We learned a lot. We saw lots of things, and we were grateful for the opportunity to let them help. We are also going to get to work on Highway 84 and go through all of those intersections too. So that's some of the things we do, is kind of like an accessibility audit and just kind of look at things. But we really seek to work with organizations and come up with solutions and problem solving in ways to make it all accessible for everyone. So, sorry, my notes are supposed to read to me and the technology wasn't working, so I just took it out. No, not yet, hang on. So one of the things, oh, okay. When we make things accessible for everyone, it doesn't just affect me. It makes it easier. Yeah, you start. It makes and that was just about where I was. It makes things accessible for everyone. So you may not realize how much easier it is for you when there's accessibility in place. Let me give you a good example. If you're looking at a video and you're in a public place and you don't want to disturb the people around you, you can flip on the closed captions and just read the subtitles. Okay, that's accessibility that was baked in that you can take advantage of to make things easier for you. And that's what we have found. When things are accessible, it's easier for everyone to get around. So 5-foot sidewalks just makes it easier for pedestrian traffic of all sorts. Moms pushing a stroller, people pulling luggage, the elderly and kids. It just makes it easier for everyone. Next slide. Okay, this is a current, I was going to show you a current project. And I'm going to plug Biddy and Bo's. If you haven't been to Biddy and Bo's, oh my gosh, you got to go to the happiest little coffee shop in Waco. This is amazing. They employ people all with disabilities. And so we had noticed their parking lot was not quite meeting the needs of some of the wheelchair employees that use wheelchairs and customers that use wheelchairs. So we got with the owners of the parking lot and the owners of the building and started brainstorming about what we could do. They had a bike parking space with a bike rack that didn't get used. We never saw bikes there. And we're getting that to where it's going to be accessible for wheelchair accessible vans and wheelchair users to be able to use those parking spaces closer to Biddy and Bo's. Next slide. Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist putting a picture of Fred in there. He has boots. So one of the exciting opportunities that just came our way recently is we were invited, some of our board members were invited to participate in the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulations. They're updating their 2012 Texas Accessibility Standards. They invited us to join their work group and help them update these standards to 2023 standards. So we are excited to be a part of that opportunity. Next slide. We also have a radio show coming up, so you can watch for us on KWBU. It's going to be, I think it's starting somewhere around January. It's going to be a 30-minute slot once a month, where we do more of like an interview type presentation. And it's going to feature disabled Wacoans, but it's also going to feature other disabled people from around Waco, McLennan County. So we're excited for that opportunity. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is how to get in touch with us. And I put my email address here if you want to get in touch with me or if you have questions. but that's how we get in touch with. And I forgot to tell you at the beginning, October is pedestrian safety month. So it was perfect timing. It's also, what is it? Blindness awareness month. Anyway, but it's pedestrian safety month. So it's a really awesome month to be doing this. But I really appreciate you letting me, update y'all on this new nonprofit that cropped up that we hope to get to work with some of y'all or any of y'all that would, that have a need for such a thing. Did anybody have any questions? Even about Fred?
Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Suzette, do you mind if I give an update on a couple of things that happened this week after you finished creating your presentation?
Sure, because I was probably writing a paper. I'm also in college, so
Yay.
at 54.
Yay.
Better late than never. Go ahead, Nate.
Two really cool things happened. Monday morning, I had a meeting at Biddy and both drove up expecting to see that dang bank rack and it was gone. So that's a victory, a small one, but an important one, because now staff members have an additional parking spot there. And the other thing that happened was, I can turn this off now, you're done. The other thing that happened was, so we did our intersections inspection, and one of the things we found out was that we noticed problems with the audible crossing signals. But the inspectors, when they came out, didn't catch those in their inspection. And so we followed up with TDLR, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And we found out that some of the things were in the code, but weren't on the checklist for the inspectors. And so the person at TDLR is going to add them to the checklist for the inspectors to make sure that those things in the code are caught. And that's going to in fact affect inspections of audible crossing signals statewide. So, and then I talked to Clayton, I don't know if he's still here. Okay, so then we're gonna do something similar along Waco Drive, and I hope I can say this. Clayton said, yeah, I'd love to know which things they're adding to the inspectors list, because we want to make sure we pass that with those things added. So it's fantastic. We appreciate everybody's
Thank you for letting us.
help
do
and let
this.
us do that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your good work. We appreciate that. Thank you for presenting to us here today. Okay, next we have our update discussion from staff regarding the 2050 MTP development process. Dr. Kumar?
So we just went through this visiting session, which is the very next step, and so I'm not going to take up a lot of time. This is what we discussed, so we are in the process of completing our regional visiting work session today. After this, we'll do the call for proposal project evaluation framework development for the next 2 months, and then we'll do a solicitation and decisions by January to June. And then in August through October, we'll have several public meetings related to that, and we'll bring the MTP final document to the policy board at the January meetings.
Any questions regarding the 2050 MTP development process? Next up, we've got consideration and action regarding approval of resolution 2023-17, adoption of a regional vision statement for the 2050 Waco MTP.
So can we move to so we just went through the regional visiting workshop, and what we have is a draft statement that we would like you to consider. And if the statement looks fine, and if you want to make some small changes to that, we can definitely do that, and we can rewrite the resolution. But it would be fantastic for you to support the resolution today, so that we can move forward with translating this vision into a call for proposal and project evaluation criteria. So the statement that we have crafted is
I guess we already
maybe it's the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. They have to take this one on faith.
Okay, I'm gonna have to read this statement. The 2050 Waco MPO Metropolitan Transportation Plan will serve as a catalyst for inclusive regionalization that seeks to make our community physically healthy, economically prosperous, equitable in its accessible mobility, technologically up-to-date and resilient, while enhancing its ability to tackle the climate crisis and preserve its natural assets, engaging in strategies which are grounded in the community in community input and involvement, and a broad understanding of performance metrics will lead to a safe and accessible McLennan County. Sure. So this is the broad statement we have, and we wrote a blank resolution so that we can fit that in there. If there is an agreement from the policy board for this to be our reasonable vision for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan for 2050, we would definitely appreciate the direction.
Are you trying to put it up there?
You
for us?
wanna read the outline,
Just things.
either that or read it one more time.
And it may sound better even if it's some.
Oh, you didn't think that too.
Are you looking for a motion to approve it?
The sum.
He's gonna put it up there.
Let's
one
put
more
it
time.
up there.
To be on it now. That sounds. Let's see.
Okay,
Yes, you do.
All right, cool, there, wonderful. So.
We're gonna put it across the lifespan after accessible mobility.
Yes,
I think that was something that was proposed.
yeah. For some of you who haven't seen this before, what Meg is listing after in the third line, equitable in its accessible mobility across the lifespan is what that.
You have a motion? To approve, do you have a second?
Second.
Second here, so we've got a motion by Mr. Zachary and a second by Ms. Bearfield. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries, we have approved our vision statement.
Thank you.
Next up on updated discussion from staff regarding current grant efforts.
So there are two important things that I wanted to update you about. So for the 2023 Smart Grant application, we have made an application for the area between Baylor campus of the Dutton Avenue across I-35 up to downtown, and with the expectation that we want to test out how use of technology could promote transportation alternatives. So essentially what we have proposed is we will try to figure out using radar and roadside units. We can prioritize some of the transit, bike, pedestrian access on all of the crossings between downtown and Dutton Avenue on the other side of I-35, with the expectation that we will know if technology can actually improve with other forms of mobility. There will be 3 different types of measurement, with which we'll measure whether it works or does not work. One important one is the total amount of transportation emission that it reduces. The second item is total amount of traffic that we expect to see in the businesses themselves, and the total amount of usage of the roadway by alternative transportation. So these are the 3 performance metrics against we'll measure if we can make technological interventions to improve transportation accessibility across other areas. The comprehensive safety action plan, the request for proposal period has ended, and we have received several applicants, which the evaluation team will be evaluating. And we expect to bring the highest rated proposal for your consideration at the November meeting for an approval, so that we can move forward with development of comprehensive safety action plan, whose timeline is to expect to have the comprehensive safety action plan finished by May of next year. Those are the only 2 updates we have.
Okay. Any questions or other discussion? Okay, update and discussion from staff regarding MPO redesignation.
I do not have an update. We are still waiting to hear from TxDOT.
Any word from our friends at TxDOT on that, or?
Claims like.
That's not my. All right. And then our next steps on that are supporting resolutions, once we hear from.
Yes,
TxDOT.
so we are expecting the TPMP division of TxDOT to give us a statement that what exactly are they expecting from the 75% population representing entity locally, so that we can have supporting resolutions from the city of Waco, McLennan County, city of Hewitt. And we had sent this information to TxDOT about 2.5 months ago, that all the local government entities are ready for this, and so they are. We're simply waiting for them to provide us with exact form of supporting documentation they need.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, let us move to item 10, updated discussion from the TAC. We have an update there.
So, at the last TAC meeting, it was presented by Brenton, and so Amy was out of town that day at a conference, and Zane was also out of town that day. If I'm going to go ahead and give the update from the TAC. And so we had the same presentation we had today from the Hyperloop. Brendan had we had lengthy discussion on this that day, and we also had presentation on Mobilize Waco's efforts. And one of at that meeting, we also made the decision about how to format the public agency listening session, in which we had several departments that we discussed earlier, from housing to public health to Waco Transit, and also Baylor University, Centex Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and most importantly, watershed preservation efforts. So we had all of these. We formatted them accordingly, what we presented today, and some of you heard from 2 of them. And so those are the only updates we have from the TAC.
Okay. Any questions on TAC activities? Okay. Moving on to updated discussion from TxDOT regarding significant highway construction within the Waco metropolitan area. Always a favorite.
All right, starting with our Spring Valley project, continue to make good progress there. Working on the east half of the roadway, looking to start our permanent paving operations. Ideally later this month, with switching traffic over to that newly constructed half of the roadway sometime in November. Still on pace for that fall of 2024 completion. State Highway 6, if you want to go ahead and go to the pictures, we'll walk through it. So at Bagby, we've got all lanes open to permanent configuration here. There's a little bit of a signal work still to be done, but again, all lanes open. Moving to the west, here you can see primarily we're working on the main lanes here. Actually, this week started placing permanent pavement for the main lanes there in the middle. And again, have the main lane traffic detoured out to the frontage roads. Moving to our new railroad crossing, actually anticipate setting beams here starting next Tuesday night. That'll be about a 2-week operation there, then start working on the deck. Moving towards Imperial, again, a lot of work going on the main lanes. Should be paving later this month into November as well. This picture is a little dated at this point, but both existing structures over the railroad tracks there in the middle have been demolished, starting to work on the substructure. Again, another beam set probably in November, get deck poured probably into the calendar year. And then moving towards 84, the bulk of the tie-in work is done. There's one remaining driveway to be poured here at the Valero gas station. That's on the schedule for next week. Once that's done, you'll have 2 lanes open on the frontage road. I know that's kind of a choke point right now. So ideally in the next week or so, that's cleared up there. I'm still on track for a completion of early next calendar year there.
All right.
Our I-35 resurfacing project, again, this is from the north limits of our 4B job, going up to Business 77. We've actually completed our milling and resurfacing in the northbound direction. Started paving operations last night southbound, looking at a week and a half to 2 weeks worth of paving there, and all of our paving will be complete. There's a little bit of safety work still to do with guard fence and things like that in that section. But again, the bulk of the work is anticipated to be done within the next couple of weeks. Our 434 University Parks widening. This is a project that's just getting kicked off. This is from LaSalle Avenue down to Loop 340, adding a continuous left turn lane and then replacing the signals at LaSalle. Started work week before last, primarily all night work right now, replacing cross culverts. There'll be a little bit of pavement repair starting after that, and then we'll start on some of the new pavement work. Again, that's about a year-long project. Questions?
I have a question, but it's, it's old, right? So the north to southbound U-turn at 5th Street under 35. The technical term is Fustercluck.
Yes.
So we're at it.
I mean, I every time I'm like, somebody's going
To get, because they're trying to get, they're coming
You're
out.
going
trying to
all
get-
the way across, and I'm
other
like,
people are coming the other.
and I
way.
noticed that at in Belmead, at that turnaround, it's got like the
So
post. Yeah.
we're looking at doing the same thing, actually. It'll actually be a part of the 35 resurfacing job. There's some work that extends down into the 4B limits for some build rumble strip, kind of a safety element. So it'll be included as part of that job.
Along those lines too, we talked about last time, when the traffic signals are turned over to city of Waco on both I-35 and Waco Drive, what's the sequencing there? Has any of that happened yet?
Not yet on either job. We're working through there's some electrical work that we've got to get completed on Waco Drive still as part of that. I know the city's looking at an overall timing plan.
Yeah.
Depending how that shakes out, if the timing plan's done and takes out some less control of it, we have the ability to get that implemented. If not, then the city can get that implemented at that time. So that is something we're working together on currently.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting experiences with those guys.
Unnecessary.
Man,
I didn't want to say.
Yeah.
Anything else for our friends at TechStop? Thank you so much. I was glad to get the updates. Okay, moving on to our next item, which is a work group update. Are any MPO work group update folks here who'd like to give a work group update?
We only have one. We had a connected automated vehicle work group meet yesterday. We had a pretty tons of very good discussion, and Suzette is going to give us an update.
The connected and automated vehicles work group met yesterday. We reconvened after meeting in 2018 to get with to help stakeholders and interested parties understand how connected and automated vehicles will impact the economy and increase what's the word? I'm batting 1,000 today. To increase the economy and that sort of thing. So we, as the MPO is developing its long range plan, we are we're focusing on developing a white paper that expresses the need for more and develops the need for more electric charging infrastructure, electric EV training and certification. There also needs to be, some ordinances and guidelines that go along with that, and just trying to look out what was there to be coming in the future as this need increases. We will be drafting a final report and presenting it to the policy board in January 2024. The next meeting is going to be for the CAB, I think it's going to be in January.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that there were a couple of items that we highlighted that even with accessible mobility, Suzette actually shared her experience in Austin, which is experimenting with autonomous vehicle-based taxi service, which in fact works out very well, not only for general population, but also a population with any form of disability. And so, connected autonomous vehicle also has implications for accessible mobility generally. But two important items also that came up with east-west corridor across Waco. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure is sorely needed. So on I-35, it's very well done every 50 miles, but east-west corridor is really what we need to be thinking about. So as part of the next NEVI planning, those are some of the areas that we would be looking at. So especially 8431 and so on. So these areas are typically, so several people who own electric vehicles, they have explained that how it's a lot harder to be traveling east-west across Waco, and it's much easier to go north-south. And then second related aspect that came up was also about the local ordinances about what the site plan guidelines for charging stations need to look like. And so a particular one that came up for discussion quite a bit, the one in Lacey Lakeview at the Roadrunner, that those DC fast charging stations are very poorly designed in terms of their site location. And so most EV drivers typically do not necessarily prefer to go there. They'd rather go someplace else. And quite a bit of it has to do with the ordinances that simply aren't on the books. Nobody has sample ordinances that one could simply choose from. And so in the CAB, we'll bring some of these issues up as well as so, yeah.
Yeah, I did get to go down to Austin a couple of weeks ago and try out the cruise cars. That was an amazing experience, and I would 100% use that for my transportation needs if I live within the zone. I thought the driving was excellent. The whole way it was set up. If you get a chance to go do that, go. They run from like 9 p.m. to 5:30 a.m., which is kind of inconvenient, but I have no problems about using one. It was just a great experience all the way around.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we move to our MPO monthly report.
The most important update I have is that one of the items you noticed, Chairman Borders, and we had a conversation about numbering system. So you'll notice that our agenda actually looks a little bit different. We do not use Roman numerals anymore. We use 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, and we will change the seating arrangements accordingly. So we had made that arrangement for social distancing during COVID, but we would like to go back to sitting in a round table area. So that's what we're going to do. And the other update I wanted to have for you is that once we have the visioning set up, we are also going to look for a very small contract for doing some of the MTP call for proposal selection consulting work. And so we'll be doing that. We'll bring for your consideration at the November meeting.
Any questions about anything? The next MPO policy board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 16th, 2023 at 2 p.m. here in the South Waco Community Center. And any future agenda item requests for that meeting? Do we have anyone here who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, our hearing of visitors? No, we did not. Okay, so we will move along to adjournment. We will adjourn this meeting and any other local entity meeting that happens to be running coinciding with it. All right.
Thank you.
Can I affix a digital signature to it? Like I have. I scan and email PDFs. Put a JPEG of an image of my signature.